North Sea 2237, July 24. 1943. The wind scours the black skin of a Lancaster bomber as it pushes east. Moonlight glinting on the frost, rimming its wings. Inside, the smell of oil and cordite hangs heavy. The intercom crackles with clipped British accents, tired, steady, pretending not to notice the cold. In the bomb bay below, instead of explosives, lie bundles of thin metallic strips wrapped in paper packets marked only with one-word window. Flight Lieutenant Arthur Hawkins glances toward his navigator. Distance to the drop. 30 seconds. Comes the reply. His gloved hands hover over the release lever. The way a priest holds a chalice. Bomb doors open. The sound is mechanical. Exact the rush of air flooding the fuselage. He pulls. From the belly of the Lancaster, the first silver rain begins to fall. Thousands upon thousands of aluminum strips whirl downward, tumbling like frost caught in moonlight. In the radio silence of the bomber stream, the crew watch them spin and vanish into the dark. They look like snow, or ash from a world already burning below. Operational Order 1923 commence window dispersal over North Sea. Altitude 18,000 feet. Intervals of 10 seconds per aircraft. For 10 minutes the fleet does nothing but release glitter. No bombs. No tracers. Just silence and drifting light. Hundreds of miles away, in a Hadar station near Wilhelmshaven, a corporal yawns, glancing at the Würzburg screen. The green trace pulses once, then again steady, and then it blooms. Another pulse, another. The entire scope floods with echo, multiple contacts. Sector B3 range impossible. Sir returns everywhere. The duty officer leans over the console, twisting dials. The hum deepens. Check soundposts. We must confirm engine count. Static answers him. He scribbles in the log, 2301. Echoes multiply. Audio nil. From his station window, he can see nothing but the moonlit sea. He feels the strangeness of silence pressing through the concrete walls, no droning engines. No anti-aircraft bursts. Yet the screen insists the sky is full. Over the North Sea, Hawkins's crew stares at the glowing horizon. You think they bought it, the gunner murmurs. Hawkins nods once. Let's hope they're staring at ghosts. At that same moment, far below, the first German alarm phone rings in an empty corridor. A technician answers, uncertain. The data makes no sense. But the order is clear. Raise the alert. In the war of machines, truth has just fractured into noise. The screens are crowded, but the sky is silent. Wilhelmshaven radar, Command 2308, July 24. 1943. The bunker smells of hot dust and bakelight. Lieutenant Otto Kruger braces one palm on the Würzburg console, while the other fingers the tuning dial through its tight arc. The scope swims clean sweep. Then a sudden thicket of pulses. He narrows the beam. The thicket thickens. Sector B3 reports mass contacts. Calls Corporal Stein from the plotting table. Voice thin in the stale air. Red grease pencils crawl across acetate, then hesitate, then crawl again. Bearings diverge. Speed estimates. All over the map. Gain down 2. Kruger says, Stein obeys. For a heartbeat the glass clears. The next sweep floods again. Brighter. Like mould returning to a Petri dish. The loudspeaker pops with dry static. No ingenious, no prop beats. Only the scrape of pens and the click-click of relays. He reaches for the field phone. Bremen. Do you copy Wilhelmshaven confirming possible bomber stream advise sound detections? A new voice arrives. Harried. Breathless. Negative sound. We count 600 returns over the North Sea. Could be multiple formations. Without noise. Kruger hears doubt smear into the question. He looks up at the wall clock 2311. Across the room, a junior tech adjusts the Jagdschloss repeater. Its panoramic band paints the same nonsense blip gardens in every sector. The duty log opens to a fresh page. 2312 scope bloom persistent. Multisector. Audio nil. Check humidity divisé par temperature drift. Kruger scribbles under it. Test feeders. Swap receiver valves. They swap the valves. Nothing changes. Try the auxiliary set. He says, Freya net. Channel 3. The operator flips toggles. The second screen answers in the same stuttering green. A runner appears with a message slip. From coastal searchlights near Cuxhaven. Sear. Debris seen falling before plots multiplied. Shiny like paper. Kruger blinks. Paper wouldn't paint radar. He remembers a rumour from training the British had trialled reflective strips during experiments in the 1930 seconds. A concept the Luftwaffe filed, under a code word, and then filed away. What was it? The syllable sits in his mouth like a pebble. The telex machine begins its metal chatter. Stein tears the strip. Reads aloud Telefunken requests immediate samples of reflective debris for spectral test at 0600. Possible relation to codename, he squints. Duppel. Doppel. The room repeats, as if saying it drains power from the lights. The word feels like a door unsealing. Kruger returns to the scope. He sweeps narrow, then wide, moves the strobe, alters pulse repetition frequency by a notch. Everywhere he looks, the ghosts multiply as if his attention breeds them. He forces procedure to continue check feeders, check cabling, reseat the time base. The techs move faster. Sleeves rolled. Hair damp with bunker heat. Wilhelmshaven to Flakgruppe Hamburg. He dictates into the handset. Radar indicates multiple streams inbound. Visual confirmation pending. Prepare batteries by sector priority. Hesitates. Then adds what training never taught him to say: radar guidance unreliable. Static. Then an officer in Hamburg answers. Irritation thickening his consonants. Unreliable how your scope, or your men Krugers. Jaw tightens. Both scopes read mass contact with no sonic proof. We suspect countermeasures. The word feels treasonous. He hangs up and stares through the bunker slit. The sea beyond is a coin-black plate, undisturbed. Above it, nothing but a thin wash of moonlight. Sir, Stein says softly, if the screens are this busy and the air this quiet, then someone, Kruger finishes, wants us to believe in a sky that doesn't exist. At 2320, the first faint hum reaches the soundposts along Denmark's coast late. Diluted by distance, but real. The plotters lean in. The red pencils move with new purpose. Forming a river through the false forest, Kruger presses the alarm stud. Somewhere down the line, sirens fail to start. Somewhere else, they start too late. He writes one more line in the log. Letters deliberate. 2321. Issue provisional alert to Hamburg. Expect deception overlay. Visual confirmation required. He looks back at the glass. The ghost fleets are still breeding, and the real ones are somewhere inside them. They will have to fight a picture to find the bombers. Hamburg, 0011. July 25. 1943. The sirens begin late, like a breath caught in the city's throat. In Hammerbrook, a woman snatches a metal box of papers and the photograph of a man in uniform. In Barmbek, a boy stuffs a wooden soldier into his pocket as his father pulls at a stubborn cellar door. Up in the black, the first pathfinders of RAF know. 8 group cut across the Elbe. Throttles steady. They do not speak much. Their job is geometry. Markerun. The master bomber calls, calm and clipped. Initial reds on my smoke. From the lead mosquito, target indicators tumble magnesium white prickers first. Then red stars that bloom and hang. swaying in the upper winds. A second aircraft trails in to correct with greens. The pattern spreads. A constellation chosen for the night's destruction. Beneath Rothenburg's Ort, the air defense bunker is a lit cave of noise. Colonel Johann Mahler moves between phones and plotting boards that hiss with contradictory intelligence. Radar, he asks. Contradictory returns. Herr Oberst. A Lieutenant Dansers, not meeting his eyes. We recommend visual only. The words feel medieval. Without radar guidance, the guns become instruments of chance. Mahler orders searchlights by sector. White lances drill into the smoke. Find nothing. Then a drifting glitter, the window still falling. Then a shape. Then nothing again. Sound locators twist on their pedestals like hunting dogs. The first flak bursts knit orange rings in a blank sky. On the river, a police launch watches the markers hang above the docks, like judgment. Report to control. A sergent says, voice unsteady. The aiming point is the warehouses. Repeat. The aiming point is his transmission drowns as the first high explosives hit. A building exhales its windows in a single sheet. In the cockpit of Lancaster F-Fox, Arthur Hawkins banks to align with the Reds. He can feel the crosswind trying to pull the aircraft off the line, the way a river catches a boat broadside. On the Reds, his navigator murmurs, eyes on the bomb site drift. Hol hol. Flak left. The rear gunner calls. Long trail, no lock. Windows working. Hawkins answers. But it sounds like a confession. Telephones fail in the bunker, one after another, as lines burn or melt. Ash-faced. Sector F3 reports fires at the oil tanks. Request permission to open hydrants from flak depots. Mahler hesitates. The manual is clear. The night is not. Permission granted. Divert water to fire corridors. Searchlight Group 6. Arc to the river. Prioritize observation over barrage. Sir. Regulations. Regulations can wait. The flames won't. Outside. Sirens tangle with church bells as wardens push people toward basements. In Eilbeck, a fire crew wrestles a hose that has gone soft from heat. Pressure, the captain shouts. The nozzle coughs steam. Over the city, the red constellation shifts with the wind. Green's correcting it back. A master bomber's voice cuts in again. Bomb the red, ignore the stray. A Halifax, hesitates. Swings wide. Comes back online. Below, a man in a courtyard tries to stamp a dozen sparks with one shoe. At 0029, a gap opens in the siren, wail the machines running out of breath between districts. 2 minutes later, the wail returns, angrier. As if the city has learned what is coming, Mahler grips the edge of the map table, feeling the tremor of distant impacts through the steel. He cannot see the enemy on his dials. He can only hear the air thicken and watch the red pins crawl toward the Elb's bend. Visual only. He repeats, and the phrase tastes like surrender. On the radio net, the master bomber marks again red steady. Bomb. Now, Hawkins flips the guard off the release. On the mark, he says, and the aircraft lightens as iron falls away. The sirens falter once more, then the wind begins. Hamburg, 0033. July 25. 1943. At first, it seems like the wind itself has caught flame. From the Elb's edge to the factory rows of Hammerbrook, the air begins to shimmer orange. Then it roars. A ton of high explosive lands near the oil tanks, followed by another. Then Hunas more. The ground lifts, breathes out dust, collapses again. Street lamps fold like paper. The bombs that don't explode on impact burrow into the mud and detonate seconds later, sending geysers of brick into the night. From 15,000 feet. The bomber stream sees nothing of streets or buildings, only the sea of light that used to be a city. Hawkins steadies his Lancaster for the turn. The glow below has swallowed the markers. Red and green melt together into a single colour fire. Navigator. Mark the drop. He says, then close the doors. Already closed. Skipper. Comes the reply. Voice small in the headset. He looks down. One of the rivers of flame follows the canal, moving like a living thing, drawing in air through every window. It is not just burning, it is breathing. In the bunker, Mahler wipes soot from his mouth and tries another phone. Dead. The ceiling trembles with the rhythm of faraway impacts. A single bulb sways on its cord, flicking shadows across the map. Observation posts. All dark. Sear. Hydrant pressure collapsed. Pipes milde. Get to the roof. Mahler orders. I want to see. Outside. The sky has turned to iron. Searchlight beams vanish into smoke. Embers fall like rain. From the roof parapet, Mahler watches a warehouse roof fold inward as if the night were chewing it. Across the Elbe. In Eilbeck, a tram car melts where it stands. In its glow, firemen haul a hose that shrieks with steam instead of water. Civilians drag mattresses into basements, believing they can choke the heat by smothering it. A minute later, oxygen betrays them. Fire runs down the stairwells in pale ribbons. A warden's whistle shrills and dies. His shadow leaves the wall before his body does. At 0047, the wind shifts again. The air begins to feed itself. Flames leap street to street faster than any aircraft could fly. Roof tiles launch like sparks. From the air, radio chatter goes clipped. Breathless Maine. Force reporting massive conflagration. Unable to distinguish markers. Understood. Continue bombing target. Remains city centre. But sir, orders are orders. One of the wireless operators, a boy barely 20, crosses himself. The wind buffets the fuselage like surf. Below, a refinery tank ruptures, and the night pulses white. Mahler's adjutant climbs to the roof, eyes watering. Sir, orders from Group Command, maintain flak until sunrise. Mahler stares at the inferno. Fire at what the fire? No one answers. The anti-aircraft guns keep firing. The bursts lost inside the glow. The Elbe reflects nothing now. It is black glass beneath a burning sky. At 0110, the bomber stream turns home. The gunners look down once, then close their turrets. Even from 20,000 feet, they can see the firestorm moving like a storm front, pulling roofs, trees, people into itself. Inside the bunker, Mahler murmurs, almost to himself. It's no longer bombing, it's combustion. A staff officer behind him whispers, then the city itself is the bomb. And it hasn't finished exploding yet. Hamburg, 0122, July 25. 1943. No one in the basements understands what is happening. The air itself has turned against them. At first, it sounds like a new bombing wave, steady, pulsing, but it isn't engines. It's wind, rushing through streets at hurricane speed. Windows implode inward. Doors are sucked from hinges. The fire has created its own weather. In the shelter on der Beneckestraße, 50 people huddle, gasping as the air grows thinner. The pressure makes the lamps flicker blue. Someone tries to open the steel hatch. It will not move. A young man jams his shoulder against it and feels the handle burn his palm. It's pulling, he whispers. The fire above them is drinking the sky. Outside, the temperature has passed 1,000 degrees. Asphalt flows. Iron railings bend like reeds. The firestorm races uphill, feeding itself with every gust. The Elbe's surface boils where debris falls in. At the police command post near Berliner Tor, reports come in fragments. Entire district Eilbeck lost. Flames jumping across canals. Hydrants dry. Then silence one station after another. Colonel Mahler and his men crawl from the bunker entrance. The air tastes like pennies. Sparks swirl around them like red snow. He pulls a handkerchief over his mouth and shouts, "This way," but his voice vanishes in the roar. At the corner of Spaldingstrasse, a tram has overturned, its windows molten. Inside, shapes sit upright, hands clasped, already gone. He forces himself not to look again. Overhead, searchlights snap as their wiring burns. Glass from factory skylights rains onto the street. The firestorm breathes in and out, a living lung made of heat and hunger. Each inhale draws in oxygen from kilometers around. Each exhale throws roofs into the air. In a bombed-out pharmacy, a nurse ties a scarf over her mouth, leads 3 children toward what used to be the river. The smallest cries, "Mama." It's raining, but it's not rain. It's glass dust. The nurse can feel her own hair smouldering as she runs. The group reaches the riverbank. The air moves sideways, faster than a train. One of the children vanishes, lifted by suction, gone into flame before the others can scream. The nurse's knees buckle. The only sound left is the wind. From the air, the returning bombers watch the orange blooms spread to the edges of their maps. The radio stays silent. No one describes what they see. No one wants to. By 0210, the temperature inside some basements reaches 300 degrees Celsius. People tear at the walls, not for escape, but for air. When rescuers dig them out 2 days later, many are unburned, just still, as if asleep. Oxygen had left before the flames arrived. In the early hours, the conflagration becomes self-sustaining. The night sky over Hamburg is visible from the Danish coast. Crews aboard ships in the Baltic report the same unnatural glow, a sunrise that never ends. Mahler reaches a tram tunnel and orders survivors inside. He looks back once more. The city's church spires bend toward each other, their crosses glowing white. For a moment he thinks he hears them ringing, but it's only girders collapsing in rhythm. He writes in his pocket diary by the light of his cigarette, "This is no longer war. This is physics." The page curls at its edges. He closes the book and climbs down. Above him, Hamburg howls like a single enormous furnace alive, and still hungry. Hamburg 0223, July 25. 1943. The noise has become constant, a single unbroken howl, inside the tram tunnel near Deichterplatz. Colonel Johann Mahler crouches among 100 civilians. The floor vibrates with each distant detonation. Sweat drips into the soot streaking his face. The air feels dense, metallic. A fireman kneels beside him, gasping through a wet rag. "Sir," they're saying, command ordered batteries to keep firing until dawn. Mahler stares at the man from where the central post, if it's still there. He pushes to his feet, gropes toward the stairway, and feels the heat pushing down from above. It is the kind of heat that feels sentient, watching. When he reaches the surface, the wind nearly throws him back. Entire blocks are gone. A storm of embers flows eastward, horizontal to the ground. He squints toward the harbour. The silhouettes of cranes sway in the glare like bent crosses. The flak crews are still at their guns, firing blind into the light. He shouts at one battery commander, "Cease fire. You'll hit the fire brigades." The man shakes his head, eyes wild. Orders are orders. Mahler grabs him by the collar. "Whose orders?" "The radio's dead. You're firing at ghosts." The commander hesitates, looks at the inferno stretching across the horizon. Then, slowly, he lowers his arm. The next shell is never fired. Mahler turns to the crews. Water lines, pumps, hoses, whatever, still work. Divert it to rescue. The city is gone. The people are not. A sergeant stammers. "Sir, that's dereliction." Mahler cuts him off. "That's survival." He makes his way toward the emergency depot. The gate has melted to its hinges. He scrawls an order in his notebook. 0240. Redirect all manpower to evacuation. Firefighting priority civilians. Ignore Luftwaffe command structure until further notice. He signs it with his rank, knowing exactly what it means. In another part of the city, the nurse from earlier has reached a tram platform half buried in ash. Her hands shake as she wipes a child's face with the corner of her apron. When she looks up, she sees soldiers carrying pumps instead of rifles. For a second, she thinks she's hallucinating. Then one of them, his uniform black with soot, tells her, "This way, Ma'am. There's a safe tunnel." Mahler oversees them as they pass, his eyes fixed on the flames twisting above the rooftops. The heat makes the air ripple like water. He can barely see. A young officer approaches. "Sir, what if Berlin calls Mahler doesn't look at him? Then tell them I was blinded." At 0305, he dictates one final note into the log recorder. It's tape skipping between static bursts. Hamburg, 25 July. Radar silence persists. Visual 0. City in total combustion. Civil defense no longer distinguishable from military. Decisions made under blindness. He pauses, breathes in the smoke, and adds, "We will not wait for permission to save lives." He clicks the recorder off. The light outside the tunnel flickers brighter for a moment, then dims. Mahler leans against the wall, feeling the exhaustion seep through his bones. He has disobeyed every order, and, for the first time that night, can finally see clearly what must be done. And for the rest of the war, Berlin will call this moment treason. Rechlin Airfield, Mecklenburg, July 26. 1943. The dawn that reached northern Germany the next day was pale and soundless, like a truce. At the Luftwaffe's test and research center in Rechlin, the engineers gathered in a drafty hangar around the night's radar logs. None of them spoke for several minutes. The columns of ink on the paper made no sense, hundreds of echoes appearing and vanishing at once. Impossible geometries of phantom bombers. Engineer Dr. Kurt Bode, a radar specialist who had spent 3 years improving the Würzburg system, stood by the console with his jaw locked tight. "It cannot be instrument failure," he muttered. Every set recorded the same madness. Major Huppert, his superior, slammed his fist on the table. "Madness or sabotage, choose one." Bode didn't answer. He picked up a strip of recording paper, traced one of the irregular spikes with his finger. The signature was too uniform to be random. "No," he said finally. "Someone blinded us." He crossed to a chalkboard and drew parallel lines across it. "If you send thousands of reflective surfaces through the air, radar sees ghosts where there are none." False positives. Huppert frowned. "Reflective surface metal. Foil. Strips, perhaps." The room went still. Everyone knew what that meant. By afternoon, a courier arrived from Hamburg carrying a scorched fragment wrapped in cloth, a piece of aluminum no larger than a postcard, burnt at the edges. Bode placed it under the magnifying lens, noting the clean cut. The even width, 16 centimeters long, 2 wide, he said quietly, the same as the memo from 1941. The officers stared. There had been such a memo, a secret report by the physicist Gert Eklund, suggesting that chaff made of metal foil could disrupt radar. The project was shelved, deemed too risky if Germany used it. The British might copy it. Now it was clear the British hadn't copied it. They had perfected it. At 1420, Bode dictated to his stenographer observation enemy has deployed radar countermeasure consistent with metallic foil dispersal. Codename unknown. Temporary blindness of Würzburg and Freya systems confirmed. Urgent recommendation development of counter-chaff filters and signal discrimination algorithms. Hepauset behorading todename proposet duppel. Outside, the field mechanics were already testing modified radar receivers, turning dials, hoping to filter the phantom echoes. None succeeded. The screens kept blooming with noise when they dropped the aluminum strips from a test plane. By evening, a message came from Berlin. The tone was clipped. Cease further speculation. The cause of radar failure is under investigation. All documentation to be classified immediately. Bodie looked at the telegram for a long time, then folded it into his coat pocket. They still think the fire in Hamburg was luck, he said to his assistant. They don't understand the real fire started here. That night he wrote in his private notes, the enemy has turned reflection into invisibility. The age of visible war is ending far away in England. The RAF Command drafted a new plan to extend window operations to Italy and beyond. The codename would soon vanish from their paperwork, but not from the war's sky. The battle for vision had just entered its next phase. Berlin Air Ministry evening. July 26. 1943. The blackout curtains make the conference room feel subterranean. Field Marshal Erhard Milch sits at the head of a long table, a cigarette burning down without being smoked. On the polished wood, a handful of aluminum strips in a porcelain ashtray, glittering in the lamplight like fish scales. The door clicks shut. The stenographer's notebook opens. Gentlemen. Milch begins. Voice sounded flat. Hamburg burns because our eyes were closed. He taps the foil with one finger. This, whatever the British call it, did. The closing. A signals officer clears his throat. Reports confirm synchronized failures across Würzburg and Freya nets. Recklin suggests reflective debris cut to radar wavelength. Codename in our archives, Duppel. The word settles like dust. A propaganda liaison leans forward. How do we explain such failure to the Volk? They will ask why the sirens came late. We don't. Milch says. He looks at the stenographer. You will write electrical interference due to atmospheric conditions. Nothing more. An engineer protests. Heat in his voice. Herr Feldmarschall. If we admit nothing, we cannot request immediate allocation for countermeasures. Milch exhales smoke through his nose. You will have allocation, but you will have silence first. He flicks a glance at the security officer by the door. All documents relating to radar interference classified Geheime Reichssache. No public mention of foil. Chaff or Duppel. Breach is treason. He turns to an adjutant. Issue orders to Darmstadt and Friedrichshafen. Tool lines to produce aluminum strips, standardized length and width per Recklin's measurements. We will stockpile Duppel by the ton. A junior officer risks a question and deploy. Sir Milch stubs out the cigarette. Not yet. He gestures toward the ashtray. If we use it openly, the British will perfect a reply we cannot see coming. We escalate only when we can control the board. Silence thickens. The room smells of smoke and wax. Outside, a tram rattle past, then fades. The stenographer's pencil scratches Directive 11/43. Acknowledge no enemy countermeasure publicly. Attribute anomalies to weather divided by electricity. Accelerate production of counterfoil Duppel. Begin studies on filter and frequency agility. All inquiries routed through Air Ministry. A field phone barks from the corner. The duty officer listens, his face flattening into bureaucracy. Recklin requests authority to run live drop tests over the Baltic. Milch's answer is immediate. Denied for now. Simulations only. The engineer who spoke earlier cannot help himself. Sir, simulations don't frighten bombers. Milch's gaze cuts across the table. Neither do confessions. He stands. One more matter. Every unit's loss reports from Hamburg will be sanitized. No mention of radar blindness. We lost the city to fire, not to British cleverness. He nods to the propaganda liaison. Draft statements accordingly. As the room empties, the engineer lingers. He palms one foil strip from the ashtray, turns it in his fingers. It's nothing, he whispers to himself, and it unmade us. In another wing of the building, a clerk stamps Geheim on a stack of telegrams, including the one sent to Bodie hours earlier. Cease speculation. Classify all notes. The seal bites red wax like a small wound. Night settles on Berlin. Muffled and orderly. In the darkness beyond the city, trains grind north with crates labelled dope, while laboratories draft filter circuits that will not work in time. The official story walks out into the world weather, not war. Across the channel, in High Wycombe, a different story is already being written with photographs, loss charts, and a new line in the operations order, continue window. The Reich chooses silence. The Allies choose refinement. RAF Bomber Command HQ. High Wycombe, July 27. 1943. Morning light filters through blackout slats, turning the briefing room a gentle grey. On the wall, fresh reconnaissance photographs curl at the edges, blocks of Hamburg reduced to ash geometry, docks, split-like ribs. A chalk line beneath each print lists the hour it was taken. The times look too close together for the size of the destruction. Flight Lieutenant Arthur Hawkins sits with a mug of tea going cold in his hands. His crew is quiet, eyes sliding between photos and the loss chart pinned beside them. The number at the bottom is the only thing anyone wants to read. 1 500. For a major raid, it's unheard of. Group Captain Renwick taps a pointer against the chart. Gentlemen, the figures speak. Window deployments correlated with a 2/3 reduction in predicted losses. Night fighter interceptions were sporadic. Radar-directed flak was inconsistent, and he pauses, choosing the word confused. An analyst in a rumpled suit. Spectacles fogged with coffee steam. Adds coastal stations report scattered searchlights. Late alarms. German gunners appear to have switched to visual only well after the markers went down. He flips a page on the easel. Recommendation: continue window nightly. Extend envelopes over approach and egress to confuse tracking. Hawkins stares at the silver packets stacked on a side table, their paper wrappers creased from hurried hands. He thinks of the first fall of foil over the North Sea, how they had watched it twist away like harmless tinsel. Harmless, he mutters, then corrects himself. Harmless to us. A door opens. An American liaison officer in a pinks and greens uniform steps in, hat under his arm. Colonel James Parker, 8th Air Force. His voice is soft, Virginia over steel. Gentlemen. Compliments on Hamburg. He nods toward the photos without smiling. We're here to talk about adapting your window for daylight. Renwick raises an eyebrow. You've your own code names. Colonel. Chaff. Rope Parker's mouth twitches. Names aside, our B-17 groups are running into murderous radar-directed flak corridors en route to the Ruhr and Kiel. Night gives you shadows. Daylight gives us accuracy and visibility. He gestures to the model of a flying fortress on the table, pencil tracing a shallow arc. We seed chaff curtains ahead of the combat box. Intervals by seconds, not minutes. We want their scopes to see rivers of fortresses where there's one. An RAF signals officer interjects. Risk of mutual interference with our H2S sets is manageable at night. Daylight will require stricter timing. He flips to a slide rule, scribbles in a notebook. Propose patterned drops keyed to pulse repetition frequency of known German sets. Parker nods. We'll fly a trial over the North Sea tomorrow. Fortress with a belly full of chaff. No bombs. If German coastal stations belch like yours did, we'll know we can drag a blizzard over their guns. He looks to Hawkins and the assembled crews. I won't pretend it changes the moral arithmetic, but it may change how many of our boys come back for supper. The room is quiet. A staffer puts a fresh stack of photos on the table. Kiel. Bremen. Hanover targets lined up like pins in a map. Each has a penciled window plan, clipped to the corner drop altitudes. Packet counts. Timing marks that look like the bars of a song. In a cramped side office, a signals team tests H2S radar with local chaff dispersal. The cathode ray tube blooms, then clears when the operator gates the receiver by narrow angle. We can keep our own sets seeing ground returns. He says, If we train for it, the technician next to him, a woman with ink on her fingertips, adds, they'll learn to filter, we'll learn to hop. She writes frequency agility on a pad and underlines it. By noon, the liaison has his answer. Bomber Command agrees to share packet dimensions, drop schedules, and radio discipline with the Americans. In return, the 8th will supply daytime observations on enemy flak behavior under Chaff, cover how quickly batteries give up on radar, how soon they switch to barrage. Hawkins steps outside with his tea. The English summer is indecisive warm sun over wet grass. A ground crewman bikes past with a crate of silver packets lashed to the frame. They flash in the light. For a moment, Hawkins imagines each strip as a tiny mirror showing a different war, one where nobody drops real bombs. Only reflections. Renwick joins him at the door. We walk a line. Arthur, he says, voice low, between cleverness and conscience. Hawkins watches a Fortress taxi at the far end of the field, heavy with nothing but foil. If it brings them home, sir, it's a line I can live on. Across the channel, German flak commanders update their manuals with barrage patterns and visual cues. The orders keep the tone of certainty, but in the margins men write other words blind. Snow, ghosts. In the laboratories, engineers sketch filters. In the barracks, crews whisper about silver. Daylight will test the trick, and the Reich will try to answer. Berlin, Lübeck Radar Testing Grounds August 1943. The laboratory doors never closed now. The war demanded continuity. Under the glare of desk lamps, German engineers hunked over Würzburg der Consoles, soldering and recalibrating. The smell of tin and ozone hung in the air. Every screen showed the same infection pulses. Clutter. Phantom echoes that danced even when the sky was empty. Engineer Dr. Kurt Bode, still thin from sleepless weeks, leaned over a cathode ray scope, filter narrowband again. He said. The technician obeyed. The trace sharpened briefly, then blossomed into noise once more. Try frequency shift. The operator rotated a dial. The hum deepened, but the ghosts remained. Bode rubbed his temples. It's not the wavelength. It's the principle. The reflection is too perfect. Across the hangar, a Luftwaffe colonel stormed in, boots echoing. We've built 10 tons of Duppel, he barked. And yet the British still blind us. Why not use our own Bode straightened? Because if we use it, Herr Oberst, they'll change the frequency again. Then we'll both be blind. The colonel's jaw flexed. They already see through us. He slapped the table hard enough to rattle the instruments. Make the machines see past the snow. Doctor, that's an order. Bode stared at the static green bloom, thinking of Mahler's last note from Hamburg, decisions made under blindness. It's not the machines that are blind, he murmured. 2 weeks later, field test, Lübeck coast. A modified Freya radar hummed atop a sand dune, its dish tilted toward the Baltic. A twin-engine Ju-88 flew a test pattern overhead, releasing Duppel packets every 10 seconds. For a moment, the scope displayed clarity, each blip following its flight path precisely. Then, with the first release, the screen erupted into snow. The operator swore, range everywhere. A captain scribbled notes. Record it. Berlin wants proof of countermeasures. Proof of failure. You mean? Someone muttered. Bode watched the patterns disintegrate. The echoes weren't static. They moved, drifting on wind currents. He realized then that each strip of foil was not a reflection but a story the radar couldn't stop telling. Once spoken, the machine couldn't unhear it. At sunset, they packed the equipment into trucks. Bode climbed the dune alone, looking over the water. Somewhere beyond that horizon, the RAF was already planning the next wave, window drifting like snow over the Ruhr. He wondered if the sea below reflected those same ghosts back at him. A dispatch rider arrived after dark with a sealed envelope. Berlin's response was short. Continue trials. Do not report to press. Effective. 1 September. Classify radar interference phenomena as Täuschungskrieg wahr. Of deception. He folded the telegram slowly. At least they've named it. He said. Behind him. A young technician asked, Do you think we'll beat it? Dr. Bodie glanced at the empty sky. You can't beat a mirror, he said softly. You can only learn not to stare too long. That night, the Baltic wind carried tattered strands of duppel across the sand, shining faintly in the moonlight like the aftermath of a vanished snowstorm. The Reich had answered the ghost fleets with mathematics and lost. London Spring, 1945. War's end arrives on paper before it arrives in streets. In a small office near Whitehall, RAF analysts box up the files labelled window. The clerk with the string and brown tags does not know what sleeps inside photographs of shimmering cascades, logbooks of loss rates halved, sketches of radar scopes blooming into snow. One officer signs the last receipt, then presses his hand flat on the crate a moment longer than necessary. We put mirrors in the sky, he says, almost to himself, and taught radar to believe them. Across the channel the ruins still smoke. But another theatre has already opened one with quieter weapons. The Allies do not demobilise mathematics, they promote it. High Wycombe and Alconbury, late 1945-46. Crews that once carried bombs now carry electronics. Where the bomb bay sat, engineers fit racks of black boxes that speak in hums and needles. The vocabulary changes: jamming power, receiver gating, frequency agility, lobe switching, angle tracking. Window dispensers become standard fittings, perfected by drills until the arm gesture of drop is as casual as opening a window on a train. In briefing rooms, chalkboards fill with new equations. A signals officer tells a room of pilots, enemy radar is a conversation up the pulse and back. Our job is to interrupt, to imitate, to shout over it, or to make it hear itself. A navigator raises a hand, and if it learns, the officer nods. Then we learn faster. German Byte, June 1944 flashback. Declassified. Long before the war ended, the Allies had already turned chaff into theatre. Off the Pas de Calais, small craft sailed precise tracks while aircraft laid synchronized curtains of window operation taxable and glimmer, conjuring phantom armadas on German screens the night before the Normandy landings. Searchlights and batteries pivoted toward the wrong sea, while the real invasion crossed to the right beaches. The trick was not only technical, it was choreographic. Radar saw what the choreographers wanted it to see. United States 1947-50. A new service wears a new name, United States Air Force. Its laboratories speak of ECM electronic countermeasures and ELINT electronic intelligence. Veterans of Bomber Command visit to lecture about window. American engineers answer with noise jammers that blur acquisition radars, deception jammers that forge range gates and false angles, and pod-mounted dispensers that throw chaff not by the sack but by the doctrine. A colonel draws two timelines on a board bombs versus electrons. We used to measure success in craters, he says. Now we also measure it in seconds of blindness. In a test over the desert, a radar operator watches his scope fill with a river of moving specks, while the real aircraft skims past the edge of his beam. He writes carpet in his log, a family name for jammers that blanket enemy sets with noise. The word sticks. Kiel Canal 1945 report. Unsealed. A German captain's after-action note. Translated, we engaged the chaff, not the aircraft. Our shells were obedient to lies. Next to it, an Allied memo in grey ink: radar deception must be assumed effective until proven otherwise. Assume the enemy will learn. The 2 pages meet like mirrors. each reflecting the other's lesson. Cold War dawns 1,950 seconds. Dress uniforms change, the physics do not. Window evolves into cut-to-band chaff, then combined tactics. Spurts of foil coordinated with barrage jamming and strict radio discipline. Crews drill the habit that Hamburg proved lethal silence until the last possible second. On NATO maps, the air corridors draw like arrows. In Soviet manuals, new chapters warn of lipistki petals, the Russian word for chaff. A young RAF pilot walks through the Science Museum on a day off and pauses at a glass case. Inside lies a single strip of dull aluminum with a neat museum card, Operation Window. 1943. He thinks of older men who taught him to trust an instrument, then taught him when to doubt it. Lessons fixed to doctrine. Stakes. If eyes can be blinded, speed and discipline save lives. Delay kills. Reversal machines are incorruptible until a simpler machine, a cut foil, a tuned hiss makes them see fiction. Human cost. The physics that shrank loss rates also turn cities to furnaces. The arithmetic never balances, it merely rounds. Legacy. Every modern strike plan carries a ghost of Hamburg in its margins. Timing marks for chaff. Pages for MCON. Annexes for deception. One historian will write, years later, that Window ended the age of pure visibility. After 1943, no commander could assume he saw what existed, only what survived a contest of sight versus story. And yet, outside a museum case, a single strip of foil still glints, reminding the next generation that the first weapon of electronic war wasn't a transmitter at all. It was a mirror you could drop from a bomber. The echo carries forward toward a child and a glass case. Imperial War Museum. London present day. A glass case catches the morning light. Behind it lies a single strip of dull aluminum, curling slightly at the edges. The placard beneath reads Window, radar countermeasure. First used over Hamburg, July 1943. A child presses his nose against the glass. Is that really from the war, he asks. His mother nods. Though her eyes stay on the text panel longer than needed, a tour guide approaches with a group of visitors. It doesn't look like much, does it? She says, voice soft in the echoing hall. Each strip was only about 16 centimeters long, cut exactly to the wavelength of German radar. Thousands were dropped every minute, to the enemy's screens. They looked like fleets of bombers that didn't exist. The group leans closer. The child squints, trying to imagine a sky full of glitter. So, it was fake. The guide smiles gently. It was protection. Sometimes, survival means learning how to be unseen. She moves on, but the boy stays. He taps the glass lightly with his finger. For a second, the foil catches a sliver of sunlight, and the reflection flashes across the room sharp, momentary, beautiful. Somewhere beyond the museum walls, the world hums with invisible signals radar, Wi-Fi. Satellites descendants of that first deception, aircraft still trail clouds of chaff in training exercises. Electronic warfare squadrons still speak of blinding, masking, echoes. The foil remains, inert and silent, yet it marks the beginning of a truth. The engineers and soldiers of 1943 already suspected that in every war after victory would depend not just on what could be destroyed, but on what could be believed. The mother takes her child's hand. Come on. Love. She says, there's more to see. They walk away. Behind them, the glass case returns to quiet. The foil's reflection fades, but only for a moment. Because echoes never really die, they just wait for another signal to answer them.